Welcome to the next edition of Tech Tips from the Presserfoot. I'm Melody. Today we're going to talk about needles. We've had a lot of people ask us questions about it, and there's a lot of different information out there. The first thing that you need to be aware of when you put a needle in your sewing machine is it the correct type of needle for a domestic sewing machine? When you have a domestic sewing machine needle, it has a flat on the back, and that makes sure that you always insert the needle with the flat to the back in most machines. There are some older Singers that the needle actually is inserted with the flat to the side. It depends on where the bobbin is. But this way you are sure you have the correct kind of needle to put in a domestic sewing machine. There are other needles out there that are round all the way at the top. They are usually for commercial machines, and they can be a bit of a challenge to get in straight. The next thing that you need to be aware of is the size. When you look at the size of a needle, you're either looking at a number like an 80/12. 80 is the European number, 12 is the Singer system. And that is referring to how big around the shaft of the needle is. This is important because it's most important that you have the needle sized to your thread rather than to your project first. The reason that is this groove that runs down the front of the needle actually hides and protects the fabric every time the needle goes through the fabric and to the bottom. If the thread is too big to sit in this groove, then it scrapes it every time it goes by, and you get that funky kind of skinned where it looks like you've peeled your thread, where it hasn't broken all the way, but you have a bunch wadded up at the very top of the needle where the needle is. That size is for just regular sewing. 80/12 is one size fits most needle. The bigger your thread is, the bigger your needle should be. And with needles, your numbers should go up. So a size 80 needle is smaller than a size 90. Both of those would be very acceptable to use in most domestic projects. I would use a 90 if I were, say, doing denim jeans, something very, very heavy and using a thicker thread. But if I had a thick thread, even though I was using a thin fabric to sew on, I still would go to the larger size needle. The other thing that you need to be aware of is the eye of the needle. There are lots of different kinds of needles in the market today. We have universals, which is kind of your I do most things. You have embroidery needles, you have top stitch needles. Those needles have eyes, the eye down here that is 1.5 to 2 times larger than the size of the needle says it should be. Therefore, it makes it easier for the thread to pass through there without breaking it. Some needles even have a Teflon coated eye, such as metallic needles. These are the kind that will help prevent friction and heat buildup, which is usually what causes your metallic threads to break. Why it is critical to have the size of the eye of the needle appropriate to the kind of thread you're using is that the thread actually passes through the eye of the needle back and forth 37 times before you see that thread down in your fabric in the stitch. So if it's too small or putting a lot of pressure on the thread, you are going to experience thread breakage. The last thing you consider is the tip, and that depends on what kind of sewing you're doing. If you're just doing general mending, sewing, piecing, then a universal is a great needle to have. It's not quite as sharp as a sharp and not quite as blunt as a ballpoint. So you could do a quick mend on a sweatshirt or something like that and not worry about it. But if you were working on a quilt or something that you wanted to see the stitching on both sides and see it nice and straight, then you want to go with a sharp needle. That's going to give you a straighter seam. And the last variation of that is a ballpoint, which is just like it sounds, very round. It goes through knits without snagging them. Those of us who used to wear pantyhose know that if you snag your pantyhose, you got a runner. Knits do the same thing, and sharp needles will cause runners in your knit fabrics. So it's a good idea to have the tip of your needle be appropriate to the project that you're using. There are lots of books and booklets out and a lot of information online. BERNINA has some, Schmetz has some. Those are top quality needles. So those are a great way to figure out what you need. And of course, if you have any questions about what needle you should be using for your project, please feel free to stop in and we can help you at any time. Thanks, and we look forward to seeing you for our next tech tip.